Okay, I've had to do some rejigging of the situation in Mesopotamia, Sinai, and to some extent the Caucasus because these are areas that suffer special logistic restrictions due to the fact they've got terrible infrastructure. Now, basically, it means if you've not got a valid supply line, you're going to suffer attrition penalties. Now, your attrition penalties are for the Allies units. If you move over half your movement allowance, you suffer 1 strength point of attrition losses per 6 strength points in the force. You also, in the monthly interphase, will have to roll for attrition, and you can end up losing 1, 2, or 3 strength points out of each force that's not actually truly in supply. Now, the big difference is here is things like desert hexes. Now, you can only trace a valid line of communications through up to 3 desert hexes. You can't, and also you can't trace it through a flood hex as well. So you have your valid supply line like here, like this Turkish rail hex here casts a line of communication all the way back to friendly cities and things which are supply sources. They can even go to ports or depots as well. Now, logistically, you can cast this supply forward three hexes up to through 3 desert hexes. So all these Ottoman units are effectively logistically in supply. The same with the British. They're able to use the rail hexes from and the ports here to cast supply to these units. There's no flooded hexes and there's no deserts in between any of these units, so they're all in supply. If we look at Caucasus, you're basically using your rail lines as supply sources. Both of them go back to ultimately that rail line goes all the way back to valid friendly cities and also friendly map edges. You can also trace to friendly supply depots. So this one, the Turks, it goes all the way back through this rail line here to the depot at Sinai. Same over here. You can trace to a friendly port there. They can trace to a friendly port stroke depot there. The really complicated one is Mesopotamia, where the supply lines are awful. Now, the Turks have a massive advantage. They can use the Euphrates and Tigris so long as a unit is within 1 hex of those particular rivers. You're logistically in supply. Now, the Allies depend on the Baza, which is a special supply source, which is able to supply up to 6 strength points per supply capability that it has. It starts at this particular point. It's got a supply capability of 3, which is 18. So it means that 18 units can be logistically in supply. Now, it can also automatically supply units within anywhere from Fao to Azur here are automatically. They're within a 6 hex radius, so they're automatically in supply. So they don't sort of affect the 18 supply point capacity. Now, that 18 supply point capacity normally could only go up to 6 hexes or 10 movement points. Now, in this particular instance, they're using a riverhead, whereas riverheads can be placed along the Tigris and the Euphrates. You can have up to 3. You can have one with a single value of the entire capability here. So in this particular scenario, you can have one riverhead with a capacity of 3, or you could have 3 riverheads with a capacity of 1, or 2, one riverhead with a capacity of 2 and one riverhead with a capacity of 1. Okay? Now, so effectively, Basra's 3 logistics points can be cast forward 10 hexes to this riverhead. And this riverhead can then cast them forward to the units here, because these units there's no flooded hexes and there's no desert hexes between them and the riverhead, which is a valid supply source. So effectively means Basra can keep 18 units logistically, 18 strength points logistically in supply. Now, riverheads lose their value to a certain extent. If you put a riverhead 11 hexes away from Basra, that would effectively lose one of its logistical strength points for each 10 hexes beyond 10. So that 3 capacity riverhead would become a 2 capacity riverhead, which means I could only keep 12 strength points in logistical supply. So some of these units would either pull supply directly from that HQ, or they would have to suffer the effects of attrition. I hope that isn't too confusing, but it still confuses me to a certain degree. Another thing, while we're here, we need to discuss heat. Heat occurs only on the Mesopotamia and Sinai front, and it only occurs in certain months of the year. What it does is it increases the amount of movement points it requires to go through certain types of hexes like desert, etc. It doubles the movement points cost to enter them, and also if you're attacking, you will suffer an extra strength point of losses if you attack during a heat turn. Desert also has a similar effect. If you attack into a desert hex, you will lose an additional strength point when you're in your losses.